In my last video, I did sea trials with my 4.2 metre inflatable boat and its homemade tent, which turned it into a little cabin cruiser. The idea being that I slept in the boat rather than my tent to avoid getting so many tick bites. Having proved my idea was very successful, it was now time to put it to a real test, my first inflatable cabin cruiser adventure. I spent 4 days away and can honestly say it's the first time I can recall going on a multi-day adventure and not getting a single tick bite or covered in red spots from midge bites. Like all my adventures nowadays, it started from my home port in Tainault, on Loch Etive. I then headed up the Sound of Mull to Ardmore Point on the northern tip of Mull, before turning west and heading for the cairns of Coll on the north-eastern tip of Coll, where I moored up for the night. The following day, I explores the southern coast of Coll before crossing the Sound of Gunna to visit the island of Tiree. Then I returned to the island of Gunna, where I moored up for the second night. The following day, I explored the northern coast of Coll, thus completing a circumnavigation of Gunna and Coll before heading back to Mull, then into Loch Runert, where I spent the third night before returning home the following day, again back down the Sound of Mull. This video illustrates that adventure and how my inflatable cabin cruiser fared. If I'm honest, I wasn't sure how this adventure would fare. The reason being I get fed up waiting for summer to arrive. It was now July and the car thermometer read 5 degrees as I took the boat to Kelly's Pier. The forecast was for rain and sunny spells, with winds going from 10 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour, so I was expecting a rough ride at times. However, I was keen to put the inflatable cabin cruiser to work, and if it survived this adventure, it would survive many more. Leaving Loch Etive and reaching open sea, I was delighted to find it not too bumpy. It was clear that heavy rain showers were on the horizon and over the hills of Mull. The hills over the Morven Peninsula were also getting a good wetting, but I enjoyed a sunny spell going round Lismore Lighthouse. Passing Duart Castle at the start of the Sound of Mull, the heavens above opened and it was torrential rain. I doubt if I could have been much wetter if the boat had sunk. As the rain eased, I pulled into a sheltered watery lay-by to dry off and slurp a hot, wet coffee. I was rewarded with an unusual view of the castle from this vantage point, and feeling happier with warm coffee flowing through my veins, I started off up the Sound of Mull again. The forecast was correct. There was heavy showers and sunny spells. Further up the Sound of Mull, both my dull mood and the weather starting to brighten. That is why I had chosen Coll as my destination. It was forecast to the brightest weather over the next few days. I wondered if World War III had started when I spied that large mushroom-shaped cloud. Passing Tobermory, I knew that very soon I would know if the sea was stable enough to allow me to do the 9-mile crossing to Coll, keeping in mind the forecast was for 10 miles per hour to 25 mile per hour gusts. Rounding Ardmore Point, I saw the crossing was possible with care. It would take slightly less than an hour of exposed sea, then I would be in the shelter of Coll's southern shore. The wind was from the north, which is why it was so cold in July. The miles flew by, and soon the low-lying land of the island of Coll was increasing in height, which meant I was getting closer. It was a surprisingly cramped crossing for the forecast, and on arrival I headed to check out a sheltered inlet to make sure I could moor up for the night there. It proved to be perfect, a narrow inlet with a little bay off the main inlet. It was also banging low tide, so I could see where to keep the boat so it didn't ground in the next low tide, which would be in the middle of the night. I tied my anchor's rope across the bay, secured on either side, and put the loop in the middle of the rope where I could attach the boat painter. This is an aerial view of my mooring spot for the night, and I was perfectly happy it was a shelter spot in the offshore wind. And even if the wind shifted direction, I should still have a smooth sleep. Secured to land at 2 points, I also knew I wasn't going to drift out to sea as I snored the night away. The drone could also see the islands of Egg, Rum and Muck, and Skye all on the distant horizon, while off the tip of Coll are the rocks and reefs of the cairns of Coll. Then the lovely sandy bay and quiet hamlet of Sorrisdale on Coll. So I was not so far away in my own chosen sheltered bay. Then it was time for my favourite pastime of slurping coffee and scoffing biscuits in areas of outstanding peaceful beauty. And the icing in the cake was I didn't have to look for a flat, grassy place to pitch a tent, and there was none in this little cove. I could happily sleep the night away in my little inflatable cabin cruiser. I was also delighted knowing I wouldn't be sleeping with the blood-sucking ticks, as I certainly thrive in Coll as well as the other places I had been bitten. After my afternoon break, I headed round to the sandy bay at Sorrisdale, where I landed to stretch my legs. I had the whole of this lovely sandy beach to myself. I wondered about going round to the cairns of Coll, but it was now quite windy, a tide was running and the chop starting to kick up, so I decided to leave them until the morning. Besides, I was now hungry and wanted to set up my tent cabin in my cruiser, so I headed back to the secluded bay and landed in the rocks beside my mooring. I enjoyed a Tesco ready meal of butter chicken curry, washed down with a brewdog or two. All the salt sea air gives me a terrible thirst. I then scoffed a bar of chocolate for afters. My boat with its extended tent cabin waited patiently for me to have a last wander around, before clambering on board and hauling myself along the mooring lines so I could attach the boat to a loop in the centre of the bay. I had a last brewdog and biscuit before turning in for the night. Then, around 10:30 p.m, I heard a herd of cows close by. If I'd been in land in a tent, I would have had to move before the cows trampled on it. I happily pulled my sleeping bag over my head and fell fast asleep in the boat. Yep, I'm loving my inflatable cabin cruiser. I was still in the same spot when I awoke in the morning. The wind had dropped a bit, so I was looking forward to exploring Coll's coast. But first I had breakfast and packed my sleeping gear into dry bags. Just as a precaution, the tent, when lowered into coverboard, keeps the bedroom area perfectly dry, even in a chop. I then set off to explore the cairns of Coll, which are the rocky reefs on the north-eastern tip of the island. I disturbed a crowd of cormorants while crossing to the cairns. Their many flapping wings wafted their fishy smell my way, something the video can't capture, but you get the drift. I headed for a small white shell beach hidden among the rocks, where I landed to soak in the atmosphere of this special place, and to boil a pot of water for a coffee and refill my flask. Then I sat back and enjoyed the wonderful half hour with the birds. I will continue this adventure in part 2 of this series, as I'm running short of time just now and I'm setting off for another adventure tomorrow. So if you've enjoyed it, do come back and watch part 2 when I get it in line, hopefully next week. Thanks for watching.